my good friend, Paul Gyodo Agostinelli Sensei. We've been friends for 20 plus years. We're both students of Roshi Jerry Shishin Wick of the Great Mountains Zen Center. And lately, like the last 10 years or so, I am a student of Gyodo, of Paul, as is Hoden. So this is an incestuous little group. And in that time of knowing and practicing Zen practice with Paul, we've shared that as well. Paul has been very active as an entrepreneur, as a tech industry professional, a startup, a serial startup practitioner over the years, and a real solid and reliable counselor for me as I was in the professional world. And we talked over the years. We talked quite a lot about our various business goings on and so forth. So he's got a practice these days, which he's going to tell you about, doing that kind of coaching and counseling for people with a spiritual practice, but also navigating the topography of the professional working world. And he'll say that better than I will. But and I see him working with dozens of people, and so I really I'm happy the three of you could join today and get a chance to hear Paul describe what it is he does, and perhaps participate in some exercises here too. So if I haven't given away too much, Gyodo, I will mute myself at this point. I'm going to go off camera, but know that I'm here in case you need help. So it's over to you. You've got the mic.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, for that introduction. Yeah, I'll start off by saying a little bit more about myself and about where this work comes from. Um, as Jeff said, I've been practicing, Zen Buddhism for over 35 years. I started in my 20s. I was a student of Maizumi Roshi's. I was a resident at ZCLA in the early 90s. I took the vows with Maizumi Roshi, and I realized at that age, that early age, my late 20s, mid to late 20s, that I really wanted my Zen practice to be the center of my life. So I really had that at the center of my life for for decades. My course of practice took me to Colorado, and then I helped to bring Shishin, one of Maizumi Roshi's senior successors, out to Colorado to start his Zen Center, the Great Mountain Zen Center. And then I was a student, and then as a senior student, and then a successor of his in 2015 is when I received transmission. Started my own center back then, the Eon Zen Center, which I currently run, and both Hoden and Shoen are seniors in that center. So rewinding back to my 20s, I knew that my spiritual practice was really the most important thing to me, but I also realized that I needed to do something in terms of work in the world that was both in alignment and also of interest to me. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to make money. I wanted to engage with the world in a professional capacity. With my own creativity, my own impact, my own engagement. So although a big part of me was actually wanting to just become a resident at the monastery and actually take a staff position at the monastery and kind of have that be really the center of my life, there was a part of me that recognized that I'd kind of potentially be bypassing a real thriving work career and a even relational development. The traditional spiritual bypassing that we all know so much about. So it was a big decision for me to actually leave the monastery as a resident and to come and actually take a job with a startup in Denver, as it turned out, and really explore that part of my life, but to try to integrate it with a really, really committed spiritual practice at the same time. So I've had a decades-long professional career, as Jeff indicated. It's been very entrepreneurial. It's been primarily primarily in tech. So I've co-founded three tech startups and ridden the roller coaster of funding and team development and product market fit and bringing a number of different products and services to market. A lot of successes, a lot of failures along that path. I've also been an executive in several other companies. I've started several other side entrepreneurial ventures. I developed a self-guided touring company in Europe, where I hosted, created, we could say, 10 hiking, biking, and driving tours over in Europe, primarily in Italy, but some in England and Spain on the Camino de Santiago. So a number of side ventures at the same time. And reflecting back over my path, I realized that I had a lot of a compass around how to navigate my professional path from my commitments on the spiritual side, even though I didn't have that many direct role models in that way. Maizumi Roshi wasn't a role model there. His work was to run the Zen Center, right? The seniors whose jobs it were to be in the monastery, that was their jobs. They weren't necessarily working outside. I was fortunate that Shishin Roshi, who the teacher that I taught with for a long time, actually did balance those quite well. He had a PhD in physics from Berkeley, and he had a long professional career as an oceanographer, as a physicist, and then in the later part of his career as a VP of software development for Merriam-Webster. So I got to see how he, negotiated a professional path that was very much in service to his primary spiritual vows, which were to teach the Dharma and lead the Dharma in the Zen Center that he had established. So I had a real solid role model in that way. But I've come in the last 5 years or so, I've come to an understanding, kind of reflecting on how our vows can inform this threefold path of personal, professional, and relational development, and how that can really be mutually supported. So that's the material that I'm going to present today. Okay, and I'll walk us through a process because we have so few people. This will be maybe more intimate than some others. So I'd love to. I've got a couple of breakouts actually that I like to do, and I'll present some material, and then we'll have a breakout. Maybe we'll have dyads with groups of 2. And then I've got a couple of those breakouts would come back. So we'll have some interactivity in this session. Okay, I hope everybody's okay with that. Great. So, that's my introduction. I'd love actually to get a sense just of where you're coming from, who I'm meeting. So if we could go around and just 2 minutes apiece on where you're at, and I'm very interested in what your spiritual vows are to the extent that you have them, and then what your professional situation is at this point. We don't have to go into your entire CV, but if you could summarize kind of where you're at and maybe where you've come from in a lean way, that'll give me a good sense of the group. Okay, so maybe David, we'll start with you. Oh, let's see. Do we have 2 Davids? We have 2 Davids? Yeah. Okay. So David Levy, and then we'll go to David Scott, and then we'll go to Justin.
Hello. Yeah. So I live in the Mid-Hudson River Valley area of New York State, and in the woods, very beautiful place in the woods. And I'm looking to how to make this very clear and simple. Before COVID, I was working in our local hospitals playing flutes for people, and it was actually work. It was an amazing opportunity, and then COVID brought that to a pause, and so I really would like to continue exploring and developing what I've done in the hospitals, and I'm I find it very difficult to make it practical, to pay my bills with that. But I'm stubborn enough that I want to do it. I want to make it work out somehow. And I've been engaged in various forms of Zen study since about 2000, with a very big pause in any formal way when the sensei came in one day to the Zendo and said, "Oh, my wife and I are moving to Maine. Goodbye." And so the Sangha sort of dissipated, couldn't hold itself. And my practice became focused in working as a potter. So I did that for quite a few years, teaching and working as a potter. And long story, but coming back to music has really become the core of my life. And I wish to, and for me, it's a form of prayer. I'm not interested in entertaining as much as some way of blending whatever spiritual means to me, which I'm never quite clear how to separate that from everything else. But that's what I wish to do with the flutes. And yeah, that's enough for now.
Okay, thank you, David. David?
Hello, Gyodo, and everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I realized today that I had a conflict. That I had another Zoom at this time. That was I'm a television producer with the Producers Guild, and there was a networking Zoom which I should go to, but I definitely needed this one more. I'm a mid-career television professional. I work primarily in nonfiction and documentary television, and I got into this profession to make a difference in the world, and I have found that trying to keep the work I do in alignment with my spiritual practice has been precarious, to say the least, in entertainment. So I'm at a point now where I have some time. The television, the bottom's dropped out of the television industry, and so this session comes at a very good time where I've always been wondering, how to make it work and how to keep it in alignment with my spiritual practice, and even more so now. So that's me.
Wonderful. I'm glad you made the decision to come to this session, David. Yeah, I hope it serves you. Justin?
I'm Justin Magnuson. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. Had a meditation cushion for a little over 20 years. It's probably got regular usage maybe the last 12-ish years. Been sort of part of a rogue sangha here in Kentucky. Buddhism is pretty disparate here. A lot of little groups. Long story short, I started hosting community conversations around death and dying about actually 10 years ago. And I was a massage therapist at the time. And had been sitting for a while, and I was like, so, Buddhist social and, social change, and came across Bernie's work and realized that Joan Halifax was a student of Bernie's. And so started kind of like just taking in as much information as I could. Flash forward a couple years, I got a job at the university, and so made a midlife career change to managing education programs, and started a lay ministry program with Red Loaf Mountain in Vermont, and received Jukai in 22. and thought that I was sort of going down more of like a lay ministry route, because I feel like right now my practice and working from vow is a lot of times just sending emails and really sending the best draft of my emails. And I want to explore different ways that, you know, the skill set might come forward in more formal ways. And so that was what I had hoped when I was doing Bread Loaves program, and it disbanded and didn't restart. So
Mm.
now I'm sort of like recognizing that working from Val is important to me, and finding and exploring different ways that, you know, are there ways that I can work from Val that's more than just sending nice emails or polite emails.
Okay, very, very good. I suspect there is. Thanks for that, Justin. The place I was living just before I went to Los Angeles and became a resident at UCLA was Louisville, Kentucky. I lived on 3rd Street for a number of months. It was a very formative time in my life. So, yeah. Dwayne, welcome. We're doing some brief introductions. Where you find yourself in your life, your practice, such as it is, your professional path, and what you'd like to get out of the session.
Sure. Thank you. First, I wanted to apologize for joining late. That must have been disruptive. And I had a work fire drill. It's a work day. So, yeah,
Okay.
Dwayne Gable. I'm in Denver. I'm a software developer and I'm approaching, what's the phrase? The highlight of my twilight, a retirement. So, trying to figure out how to navigate that transition. I don't feel like, yeah, there's a spectrum of things. Number one, the idea that the ideal that I see in a lot of people that really don't stop working, right? There's not really such a thing as retirement. I mean, the nature of the work may shift, but trying to find out what that might be. I mean, I have other interests outside of work, so I don't think occupying my time would be an issue. But there are also some financial considerations that it would be best if I postpone, full retirement for a number of years. But I'm not sure I want to keep doing what I'm doing at the level that I'm doing it at. Right. So sort of intensive software development, kind of I'm more of a senior person on a team. I'm not a people leader. I'm not in a senior leadership position or anything like that. I am a worker bee, but anyway, looking to try to navigate that process. My background in meditation is that from my early 20s through my mid 40s, I practiced in the tradition of Paramahansa Yogananda, the Kriya Yoga meditation tradition. That dropped away. I just kind of hit a brick wall, and then I became more attracted to Zazen as a practice, and so started practicing with the Denver Zen Center prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, that also fell away, and I'm unaffiliated right now.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks, Dwayne, and thank you all. So yeah, we're all on different parts of the path, but the material I hope to present is supportive for everyone in what you've articulated here. So let me zoom out a little bit in terms of the overall roadmap that I see and what the session will be about. So the way the important parts of the process that I have identified are to review what our current kind of commitments are, to reclaim what our conscious commitments are, and then there's a process of finding inspiration in what the new thing might be, or what the version of the old thing might be, and then there's exploration involved. So, which is to say, you're all at various parts, kind of at that whole process. This session is going to focus more on the front end of that process, not so much the inspiration and exploration, but the review and the reclamation part. And I'll wrap this up at the end of the session as well, but I want to set that framework. And I'll also say that, I work with people one-on-one to move through this material over the course of many months. So this is really concentrated session around one part of a process. Okay. So with that, we'll jump in. I'll do my screen share and hopefully this will work. Let's see. So I see on the working from vow side, is it just a smaller screen with the bigger landscape behind it?
Yeah, it's
Right.
slightly smaller than your talking head screen, but they're side by side and just a little bit more narrow.
Okay. Okay. So I called this working from vow discovering your bodhisattva potential as a professional. We've done our introductions, and then I'll talk about the aspects of the bodhisattva, just a little bit on that, and then get into the main meat, which is the 3 sacred contracts, as I understand them, and then I'll talk about commitments and vows. Those are our main parts tonight. As I mentioned before you came, Dwayne, we'll have a couple of breakouts as part of this session, and have some interactivity there, and then there should be some time from overall Q&A at the end of this session. So aspects of a bodhisattva, all of you have some level of understanding of a bodhisattva. It's a very rich archetype, to explore. It's a very deep aspect of ourselves, to practice and understand. So I just want to in a very simple way, just talks about some of the aspects that I think are important for this investigation. So bodhisattvas, as we know, are committed to helping all beings. That's kind of their primary energetic. And we understand that we're all, in Mahayana Buddhism, we're all bodhisattvas in a way, but we're at various levels of actualization or consciousness around that bodhisattva functioning. Okay. So, but the primary archetype is really committed to helping all beings, but it's helping all beings not as separate from us. Well, I should say not exclusively separate from us, because we honor both the relative and the absolute dimensions. So yes, we're all separate, which gives us the ability to interact and to help each other and to learn from each other from that relative dimension, but we're also unified. So one of the really resonant kind of images of bodhisattva functioning, and this comes from Bernie Glassman, is when one hand is injured, the other hand doesn't hesitate to reach over and pull the thorn out or to take care of the wound, right? It's that kind of level of oneness, that there's no question about what needs to be done. There's just help that needs to be done. And at the same time, they're 2 separate hands with 2 separate functions. Okay, so that's a nice kind of model. Bodhisattvas aren't self-centered the way that ourselves are so self-centered. They're committed to not orienting their own selves, their own experience, their own life from that natural place of self-centeredness that our egoic consciousness tends to default into. So I just love this quote from Norman Fisher that I've been publicizing recently. Bodhisattvas don't mind much what happens to them. Their lives are larger than the plans they may have for them. And I really love this quality. They don't mind much what happens for them. Now they obviously care what happens to them. It's important for us as bodhisattvas to care what happens in our personal lives and what happens to us as individuals. All these things are important, but the over concern that we tend to bring to those things, to our promotions and to our job path and to our ups and downs, to our successes and our failures, to our accomplishments and whatnot, to pull that concern away from that self-centeredness and to put more of it in terms of, well, what's happening in the bigger picture, that kind of zoom out. Bodhisattvas make impossible vows. And those of you who have, taken vows formally or even chanted the Bodhisattva vows at the beginning or the end of sitting days, know numberless creations I vow to save. Inexhaustible delusions I vow to dissolve. These are impossible. They're impossible to actually fulfill these. And this is an important quality of a deep spiritual vow, is that we go to something that's impossible to actually fulfill, which means it's different from a goal, which is achievable and completable. These are never actually completable. And yet we're activating our imaginative and intuitive and compassionate depth of potential in order to put ourselves into that position. So, and then this is important, you know, bodhisattvas are committed to really accepting and even welcoming challenging conditions. And this is an orientation that, you know, our normal egoic functioning tends not to do. You know, we're driven by pleasure, avoidance of pain, satisfaction, lack of challenge, ease, comfort. These things, we're naturally drawn to these things. But to actually turn an orientation into welcoming challenge, welcoming difficulty, welcoming pain, welcoming suffering, welcoming these things, it's a fundamental orientation of the bodhisattva. When we enter into this quality, so my thesis here and my experience is that orienting ourselves in this way tends to put your whole life into a good perspective, and a lot of it gives you a real good primary compass for making decisions with respect to relationship and career. Okay, so what I've developed as what to me has been a very helpful framework for understanding our work as bodhisattvas in the world, self-actualization even, you could say, is this concept of the 3 sacred contracts. And I've developed this as kind of an extension from a book that David Whyte, some of you might be familiar with David Whyte, the poet and even spiritual teacher. He's got a book called, I have it in front of me, The 3 Marriages, Reimagining Work, Self, and Relationship. Some of you might be familiar with it. I highly recommend it. It's actually, I think it's a couple of decades old now. And to be honest, I actually haven't reread it recently, because when I first read it, it just had a bunch of ahas with respect to my own life. And I have since looked at my life with respect to these 3 areas, and it's been given me a really good support, you know, for working these things out. So I've also been working with many people individually, you know, scores of people individually over the last 4 to 5 years on orienting and balancing these 3 contracts. So that's going to be a big meat of what I'm going to get into now. So the contract with self is about self-development, personal development, understanding yourself, actualizing yourself as an individual. Okay, we all have our own karma that comes from our upbringing, previous lives, perhaps, who knows, okay? Our inculcated understandings and beliefs and conditions and traumas, potentially, those are all coming. Now, what is our commitment to ourself to heal and to grow? This is very important. Our spiritual vows, our spiritual commitment is kind of, in a way, an extension of our self commitment, right? And this is maybe something of a radical understanding, but I want to explain what I mean by that. We all know, perhaps, Dogen's statement, to study Buddhism is to study the self. Right? Now that itself is a pretty radical statement from a spiritual teacher, right? You don't hear the Pope or, you know, leaders of a lot of other religious traditions or spiritual traditions saying studying this wisdom tradition is about studying the self, right? Now, obviously that can go into a very narcissistic direction, and a lot of people have taken things that way, okay? But the radical significance of saying, in order to realize myself as a full spiritual being, and my spiritual development is about really studying myself and understanding myself. That's key to a Zen path of self-actualization for me. Okay, so that self and spiritual vows are together. We have this whole area of our life, which is about relationships, our interdependence with other beings in intimate relationship, our emotional intelligence and our development of this area, right? It's of supreme importance. It's as equal importance that we hold this area of our lives with the same level of sacredness, intentionality, consciousness, and commitment as we hold our self-development and our spiritual development. And the same holds true of our sacred work, of our work in the world. We have to be conscious of and intentional about, I say we have to. It serves us and serves others to become conscious of what is the meaningful work that we are called to do in the world, and how does it relate to, support, or perhaps conflict with these other vows in our life. All right, that's the overall framework that I want to get into here. So I want to say, I want to go back a second. So we actually have this kind of understanding of a sacredness in some areas here, right? In self-development, we have the understanding of spiritual vows. We can take the Buddhist precepts. That's we recognize that relationship as sacred. Okay, do we have a sacred relationship with ourselves? Well, maybe. In our modern culture, certainly self-development is very important, but is it considered a sacred task on the level of a sacred vow? Usually not. We say, oh, it's for the priests and the monks and people who take Buddhist vows. Those are sacred vows, but my actual self, relationship with myself, that isn't really a sacred relationship. Okay. Our relationships, right? We've got marriage vows. So at some times in some places, it rises to the level of sacred in the common understanding, but it's always sacred, and it has to be consciously made sacred, no matter what, the orientation is that you're developing. This is my view. And it's the same with work. It's to bring that level to a conscious, sacred dimension, right? We have some professions perhaps have an even explicit sacred expression of the vow. The Hippocratic Oath is one thing I'm thinking of, or a conscious expression of the sacred work that I'm doing and the work I'm doing. Doctors may have that, caregivers may have that. There's a certain element of work in the world that people may bring that up as a high value, but my understanding and teaching here is to find the sacred dimension in the work that you're doing, no matter what you're doing. Okay, so we do have this modern challenge in this way. The old monastic form, we study the old golden age of Zen teachers and over the centuries, and basically the whole monastic model is adapting at best, but in many cases subordinating or bypassing sacred contracts with others and work, oftentimes to deleterious effect. Okay, I mean, the home leavers who went into a monastery are like no relationships, and the work is all about monastic work. It's to support the community, which is great. I mean, there's a real conscious commitment there. I would argue that the bypassing of the relational side of things has resulted in the spiritual bypassing that is quite endemic, even now in spiritual communities. Okay, because it comes from a monastic tradition that quite consciously bypassed relational development and holding relational and emotional development as a sacred contract. So in modern life, we can't do this. We have to honor each of these contracts on its own terms and in relationship to the other contract. So I want to talk about, forms of bypassing, which happen. So I think we're all familiar with spiritual bypassing. That's where we throw ourselves into our spiritual development. And as I just mentioned, we think we don't have to do emotional work. We don't have to do healing work or cleanup work or trauma work. that our spiritual development is going to take care of that. Now, some people also bypass their work in that way. They want to hide out in a monastery. They don't actually want to do engaged, difficult, challenging work potentially. Okay, that's the spiritual bypassing. Now, people bypass in other ways too, and I think it's probably even more common in our culture to do professional bypassing, where we're actually throwing the work of our contracts with others and our spiritual contracts and our contract with ourselves onto the work side. So we're looking for the approval and self-worth that are part of the contract with self, and we're looking for that from our work. We're looking to resolve our relational kind of selves, in our work. We're just loading everything over into our work, and we're having the work contract do the work of the other contracts. Okay, I call that professional bypassing. And then there can be emotional bypassing too, where that contract with self, understood as taking care of the self and the conditions, that gets all the attention, and the other contracts with work and with others get shortchanged. Now, this is probably a sensitive word to say woundology, so that's kind of at the extreme, I would say. I don't know how many people are, really doing that, but we all can do this at subtle levels, is overload certain contracts and bypass certain other ones. Okay, so I'd like to do a breakout right now. The prompt is, do you have a clear understanding of your 3 sacred contracts, and how might you be bypassing? Okay, there's a lot of territory here, but maybe we'll spend, I'll break you up into dyads, into 2s, and take 5 minutes apiece sharing on this, and then we'll come back and we'll do some spot sharing for a little bit. Okay, so I want to cut to the chase on the message of this workshop, which is that the way to actualize your Bodhisattva potential as a professional is to consciously make and honor your 3 sacred contracts. That's the juice. That's the heart of it. Oh, I can do a light show. That probably looks a little better. Consciously make and honor these 3 secret contracts. So there's how do we do this? How do we do this? So I want to talk about vows, and vows or commitments are the way to bring these contracts, to consciousness, and to be specific, about what it is that we are wanting to bring forth, and what it is we're willing to do and wanting to do in order to do that. I want to reference another reference that has been really helpful for me in this regard. It's Jan Chosen Bays, who's in our White Plum lineage. Her book, The Vow Powered Life, A Simple Method for Living with Purpose, has been really helpful for me, and I've got some of the teachings of her framework here. In a way, you could say I've adapted her work on vows and an understanding of vows together with this understanding of the 3 contracts, because she doesn't talk about the 3 areas separately in the way that I do. So I'm kind of combining these. Humans are goal-making beings, and vows are good for our health. It's actually, there have been studies done on this, and this is quite true. So vows and commitments give us a sense of well-being, purpose, satisfaction, meaning. They actually enhance our physical, mental, and emotional health, and they lead to nourishing and meaningful relationships. So this is encouraging, to know that vows are good this way. Sometimes we can look at them as burdensome, but they're incredibly empowering and good for our well-being. Now, this is really important. There are types of vows, and it's really important to understand where these are coming from. And the work that I do is to reflect on what their existing vows are, and then to bring those to consciousness and to rewrite our vows. So there are three types of vows that kind of are at work in our lives. There's reactive / overreactive, there's inherited vows, and then there's inspired vows. An example of a reactive vow would be, my parents were liars, so I'm committed to telling the truth all the time. Or my parents were fundamentalists in some way, and I didn't drink, so I practiced drinking consciously. All right, that could be those could be reactive vow. You could also have, my parents were alcoholics, so I vow not to drink at all. Okay, it can go in a number of directions. Now you can go overreactive, right? Because some reactive vows can be very generative and very healthy. You could, however, say, I grew up poor, so I obsessively hoard things. Okay, you're going overboard. You're a fundamentalist parent that didn't drink, so I'm just going all in on that. Right? It can be overreactive in those ways. Okay, we obviously have these inherited vows that come from our parents or from our culture. This is one that a lot of people have, perhaps in our socioeconomic, we're probably all in a similar place here. My parents valued education, so I've always worked hard academically. Okay. We definitely all have inherited vows around work, right? Why are we working? What's the purpose of it? Right? Have you looked at that dimension of your vows? And then there's the inspired vows. I'm inspired by my own experience, my own values, my own people that really just jazz me up, inspire me, say as Martin Luther King, to work for social justice. Okay, those are the inspirational vows. So when we make vows, there's some guidelines for how to make them and which ones are better than others, you could say. So spiritual vows, this comes from the work on vows that Chosen talks about and Robert Emmons has done studies on. When we can create a hierarchy of vows, right, across these areas. And when we do put our highest vows as being spiritual vows, then that's the best thing, because we're putting our everything into the highest context. And we have that overall compass that allows us to really orient. So those of us who, really practice the Bodhisattva vows, if you've taken the Buddhist vows, when you hold those at the top, it gives you this amazing primary compass for doing everything. So to put those spiritual vows at the top, you want your vows to be inspired. Okay, reactive can be good. Inherited can be good in a way, but if you're not conscious of those dimensions, you're going to end up probably bypassing, or you're going to end up with conflicts and confusions that are difficult to resolve. All right, so you want them to be inspired, and one aspect of inspired means generative. All right, they're actually creating something new in the world. You're using your imagination, you're using your intuition, you're using your creativity to bring something forth in the world, as opposed to negating something or preventing something or stopping something or protecting something. Okay, there's places for that, for those activities, but it's important to lean into generative activities. Bodhisattvas are generative, you could say. And vows that lead towards intrinsic sources of satisfaction. And I'll say a little bit more about this, but intrinsic sources of satisfaction have to do with your own interests and passions and values, as opposed to saying getting money or status, recognition from the outside. Okay, intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. So when the vows are based, you could have a vow that says, I'm going to make $1 million, or I'm going to make $10 million, I'm going to make as much money as I can. It's a perfectly valid vow. It really is. But you are limiting your overall bodhisattva potential if you're gonna tie that to an extrinsic motivator like that. Okay, so we've touched already on some of the problems with vows. I want to get a zoom out. So one problem is when they're unconscious. All right, and we've touched on that. We're all mostly probably unconscious of our vows. Until we've done the work of becoming conscious of them. So that leads to problems. Bypassing, we've talked about. When we have one contract do the work of another contract, that's bypassing, that's going to lead to problems. Now, even when we've brought them to consciousness and we don't feel like we're bypassing, we're going to have conflicts, right? I've got this commitment to my family over here, and I got my commitment to my spiritual practice over here. An event comes up, and there's going to be a conflict between them. That happens. That could happen every day, potentially. Okay. And then there's compromises. Okay. I've got to shortchange this one in order to fulfill this one over here. Conflicts and compromises are kind of the work of our work. It's the work of our life is to work with those things. But we have to bring them to the level of consciousness where we recognize what's in front of us. And then when we make the conscious decision of how to work with them, that's the best we can do. So we identify and release our unconscious commitments. We identify bypasses between our commitments. We intentionally set new commitments, and then we work with conflicts and compromises. That's kind of the path. Okay. Okay. I want to drill down a little bit into the tools around making vows to self and making vows to work. So the tools for making vows to self, and I'm including the spiritual vows in vows to self here, spiritual and lineage study. Most of us are practicing some form of Zen. So that's our resource for those spiritual vows, right? It's great. It's done for us. We got it. The lineage has given us a beautiful articulation and a deep, profound expression of how to hold these vows. I'm so grateful to the lineage, you know, for offering this to me. Identifying your core values. So this is something that I've found to be of important that I didn't really get in my path of development. Certainly not in my Zen path, and you know, I didn't do this work. A lot of people do this type of work in other contexts, but I found it to be really important because there can be a way of bypassing, you know, this level of the self for those of us who feel like, you know, we're just gonna really surrender to a path of Bodhisattva activity. There might be an inherited kind of view, like I'm supposed to not, you know, selfishly hold on to my own values or interests even, but it's very important to identify your core values and interests. So I use some, you know, worksheets around value and vow discernment. There's a number of, you know, modes that you can do that with. If we had more time, and I can do other sessions perhaps on doing that, but identifying your core values, you know, it could be integrity, it could be compassion, generosity, adventure, creativity, wisdom, to really boil down your top 3 to 5 and recognize that these are things that you have to bring forth in your life. Right? You have to bring forth in your life. If you don't bring these things forth, you're going to be betraying an aspect of yourself. So when I work with people on these, I have pointing and probing questions around what is the aspect of yourself that feels like a self-betrayal if you're not honoring? What is it that actually makes you angry when you're not doing it in your life? Right? What makes you angry when you see a certain value isn't promoted in the world? Okay, these are pointers to what your non-negotiables are with respect to core values and core interests. And then I've never really been a big fan of personality assessments, but in this work that I'm doing, I've actually taken some value in doing certain types of assessments that are more archetype based, that can, you know, have helped me to bring some awareness to how I operate and what my main kind of archetypes are for really bringing my own self, you could say my own karmic, you know, identity, my own conditioning alive in the world, you know, my unique imprint, my unique blueprint, how that wants to express in the world. So there's a number of assessments that I look at that kind of you know, help with that. I'm really scratching the surface of this, but I just want to point to these tools. So the tools I use, and some of us are in the place of wanting to be, okay, we're in the inspiration phase. Okay, so there's the review and the reclaim, and then there's the inspire, so find inspiration, and then there's explore in order to, find what might work in terms of new modes of being. So as part of this stage, with exploring work, I find it important to reflect on what's important to you in terms of doing fulfilling work. Okay, and this comes from sociological research, and I've tweaked it a little bit. I've added a few things to it, but I have people look at these 7 now factors, all of which are important, right? These are the primary factors that produce fulfilling work: vow alignment, interests and skills, impact, community, money, and status. Right? So what I do is I have people rank these in order from 1 to 7 of what's most important to you. Now, some of the standard frameworks for using these, they don't have vow alignment in there. I've added that in there. So if you consciously put that number 1, and then you do the work of expressing your values and vows, you're going to be really well set up for compassing yourself toward certain opportunities. Okay, but then it's important to do to rank the rest of them as well. Once you do that, you can then, this is for us, quants out there. If maybe all of us have an inner quant. This exercise kind of meets that. Ranking these and then scoring from 1 to 10, how much, say, your current position or a potential position or role, perhaps even one that you're imagining, ranks on the factors, right? So how well, I could get David Scott, you've got this job which is kind of really not serving you. You feel like in a certain way. If you do this exercise, I think there could be some real ahas for you. Rank in order of importance to you, and then score from 1 to 10 how much your current job is satisfying these. And every time I do this with people, there's usually like some ahas. It's like, oh, Jesus, okay. It's usually a low score on one of your top 3. So there's a tool there. Okay, I don't think we have the time to do this next breakout. I think I'm just going to offer this as the next steps would be to articulate your vows. And this is kind of a template for doing that. I vow to honor and develop values and qualities. It could be the core values that you did in your core value research. It could be your spiritual vows that you've inherited from your from your lineage. When I do this, I can say I vow to practice the Bodhisattva vows. I've got a nice little shorthand that points me to the Bodhisattva vows, and I've got that in myself by doing something, and in my work by doing something. All right, this is a really basic high-level template for structuring this awareness. And then I like to add, something like being honest about where I'm falling short and always being willing to learn and improve, to articulate that as part of the vow. Okay. I'm going to stop the share, and I see we have about 6 minutes left. So yeah, I'll just sort of frame kind of what we had of the whole process is one of reviewing, where your commitments are. I call the review. There's the reclaim, which is to really express, discern what your current commitments are in the 3 areas, and then to understand where you might be bypassing and unconscious. Then the next phase is to with your with your imagination and your inspiration to find the different areas that you can extend your current work in the world or explore new opportunities. And then explore is kind of that fourth phase, is you actually take steps in those directions. And in my framework, I have a branching paths model where you can have, research conversations and you talk to people, or you can do some projects, or you can take a radical sabbatical. There's some very practical forms of exploring the different opportunities and forms that you can, that feel to you to be in alignment with these 3 areas of vow. So I'm going to conclude there, and we have 5 minutes. So I'd love any comments, questions that you might have. I see furrowed brows, so I feel like there's got to be some questions.
I just said that there was a lot there, and I'm looking forward to going back to the replay of this video so I can actually do some of those exercises that you had mentioned. Because thank you. It's been great.
Okay, yeah, like I said at the beginning, this is deep work. I'm at the top of the iceberg there, and I do work with people one-on-one in multi-month courses to help with this, and then also groups. And I'll let you know about opportunities I have for that if you're ever interested in joining in either of those modes. But yeah, it really benefits to do a committed discernment process around this, and then I tell you, things just get clear, and you have a compass. And then I got to say, when you start doing this work, stuff starts happening. With all of my clients, within a week or two of like turning in and doing this work, things start happening, affinities start happening, people are meeting, you meet people professionally or relationally. I mean, there's magic that happens when you turn into your commitments and express them consciously. It's really quite amazing. So, yeah. Anyone else?
Sensei, forgive me if you did this already and I missed it, but have you shared how these folks can get in touch with you?
I don't think I have. I do encourage you to sign up. Just go to my site, zenatwork.org. That's what it is. zenatwork.org, and sign up for my Zen at Work newsletter, which I'm pretty active with. Zen at Work Today, it's called. That's a Substack newsletter. And also, if you'd like to connect with me, I've got a free discovery session that I can offer, and the form is on the website, so you can send that in and we can set up a one-to-one.